I'm Jill Angelo, host of the G-Spot. I speak with the most forward-thinking experts in the medical and wellness industries, all in an effort to bring awareness to women's hormonal and vaginal health. When we feel fabulous in our bodies, we are more confident, we have healthier relationships, and we have better sex. Here's to a happy, healthy vagina. I'm here with Dr. Anna Garrett today, who has been a clinical pharmacist for over 20 years and has worked in a variety of practice settings. While traveling her career path, she discovered that working with women in midlife is her true passion, and she offers a variety of services, including hormone balancing, weight loss, and health coaching designed to help women in perimenopause and menopause escape from hormone hell and feel amazing in their bodies so that they can rock their mojo through midlife and beyond. I love the attitude associated with that, Dr. Anna. So welcome today, and thanks for joining us on the GeneSNP podcast.
Well, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and a little bit about your focus on helping women, really get their midlife mojo back. I love the sassiness and the attitude that you approach women's health with just that saying.
Yeah, I used to call myself Chief Mojo Officer of my company, but people didn't really understand what that meant. So now I just call myself Hormone Expert. But anyway, I like it too. But as you mentioned, I've been a pharmacist for over 20 years, and I have worked in a lot of places. And most of that time has been spent working with big hospital systems, and I really had gotten burned out on doing that. So in my last job, I had a chance to take a coach training program, and I loved it. And so I knew that I wanted to have my own business someday, and my plan at that time after taking that training was to be a life coach for women in midlife, because I am one, and I see women getting stuck all the time, floundering around because they aren't living their lives to the fullest, or they feel lost because their kids are gone, or their marriage is breaking up, or whatever. I mean, there's a million different things that happen. But when I started that, I really felt like something was missing, because it took me a long time to get through pharmacy school. And I really hated to give that up, because that's 6 years of school that I was basically just going to leave behind, and something about that didn't feel quite right. So I had a friend who owns a compounding pharmacy, and she was doing hormone consultations for her customers and clients. And so I went and shadowed her for a day, and lo and behold, by the time I left, I knew that was the missing piece. And so I did some training with the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and practiced on a few friends and got started.
That's great. When you think about, you went and studied hormones and hormone management, can you tell us a little bit more about what that is? Because hormone is used as a really general term to mean lots of things. She's hormonal, or it can be used in a negative kind of sense, but it's also a really general term that I think just general consumers and general women aren't familiar with. Can you just explain what the study of that really meant?
Well, it's basically, so it was, I don't know how many hours of study it was, but it was a lot. And what I learned was mostly geared toward women. Obviously, men have hormones too, but I don't work with men, and it's not because I don't like them. It's just because that's not really my, what I want to do. But so women have estrogen and testosterone and progesterone, and those are their three main sex hormones, and they get out of balance. And so the course that I studied was basically learning about how to keep those in balance, and the contribution of thyroid to those sex hormones, as well as cortisol, which is one of our stress hormones. So they all play together very intimately in the body, and there's really not a way to tease out management of one versus the other. So basically what I do is I look at an overall picture of balance, and then try to target lifestyle plans and supplement recommendations, and if needed, bioidentical hormone recommendations for the client. So that's what I call hormone management. But there's a lot that goes into it, and as much stress management as anything else. So I help people with that as well. And just it can be a lot of different things.
But it makes sense just even as you went through that list of hormones. Stress management, it certainly comes into play tied to cortisol, and again, something we don't typically think about, but it's all an equation, and it sounds like you've kind of refined it down to markers and things that trigger them to try and manage that. One common term associated with hormone management in women is HRT, or hormone replacement therapy. There's a lot of conflicting information out there for women. Some women find great relief in it. Others are incredibly, it doesn't work for them because they've got a history of cancer in their family. Can you tell us a little bit about, your perspective on HRT and how and if and when you prescribe it for women in menopause?
So as you said, HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy, and you'll also see BHRT out there, and that stands for Bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, which includes compounds that are identical to the compounds that your body makes. And so this can include estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone, and you can do one or two or all three as replacement depending on the symptoms that a woman has. My perspective on it as a pharmacist is really that it is not the first place you go when somebody's having symptoms. The first place you go is lifestyle, because there is so much that can be accomplished by cleaning up your lifestyle. So when I say that, I mean cutting out alcohol, stress management, eating a healthy, clean diet, staying away from caffeine in some cases. So there's a whole laundry list of things that can make somebody feel a lot better without going down the hormone replacement road. And most of my clients are trying to avoid going down the hormone replacement road. Now, having said that, it really, in my mind, boils down to quality of life. And if you are somebody in midlife who's having symptoms that are affecting you so adversely that you're just miserable, then of course it may be time to, entertain the idea of hormone replacement. So I, as a pharmacist, can't write prescriptions for estrogen and testosterone. So I have to make recommendations to the woman's physician about that, and that usually works out fine. Progesterone, believe it or not, is available over the counter. So that is something that women can do on their own, although I always recommend working with an expert because you can mess yourself up with progesterone. So, but that's what's meant by HRT. But when I say HRT, I'm generally referring to the bioidentical variety.
You touched on a couple things there, Dr. Anna, that I'd love to jump into. Like bioidentical hormone therapy is one thing I'd love for you to explain a little bit further. You'd mentioned their hormone, or their like hormones, like what's in your body. Can you just take it one step further and help people understand how is it truly different than HRT, than traditional HRT?
So traditional HRT is synthetic hormones. So that would include products like Premarin, Provera, which is a synthetic progestin. It includes the hormones that are in birth control pills. So those are all synthetic, and they are not similar to what your body makes. And so they don't have the same kind of activity. So let's take synthetic progestins, for instance. So that particular product is designed for uterine protection, and that's pretty much all it does. Whereas bioidentical progesterone, which is not the same as progestin, not only has uterine protection for women that have a uterus that are on estrogen therapy, it also has a lot of benefits when it comes to nerve health and bone health and brain health. It calms you, and the synthetic product doesn't have any of those extra benefits. So women can have some pretty adverse reactions to synthetic hormones, and those would include things like, weight gain and mood swings and things like that. Whereas they tend to have less of those sorts of problems with the bioidentical products. And the bioidentical progesterone actually comes from wild yams. And sometimes you'll see wild yam cream on the market and for sale in health food stores. But that is not as effective as progesterone because your body can't do the conversion of the wild yam diosgenin, which is the active ingredient in it. It can't convert that to progesterone. So that has to be done in a lab. But it's still identical to even though it's converted in a lab, it's still identical to what your body makes. Synthetic estrogens, some come from the urine of pregnant mares, so that brings up all sorts of things for a lot of people, as it should. And then the other ones are just chemically created by pharmaceutical companies.
Got it. That's fascinating. You had mentioned as well that, there's a lot of over-the-counter progesterone creams available to women. And sometimes, if they're administered without, some expert guidance, they can cause more harm than good. Can you explain that a little bit further? And what kind of harm can those creams create?
Well, there's not a whole lot of downside, but there are some women who gain weight when they start progesterone, and that technically is not supposed to happen because progesterone actually slightly increases your body temperature, so it's really supposed to help you lose weight, but some people have an opposite reaction to that. It can make you tired. It can worsen depression. So those are the big things that sort of leap to mind when I think about progesterone. It also can, if your body is under a lot of stress, it can get shuttled right into the making of cortisol, and most people don't need that. So that's the thing that, I talk to people most about is their stress level, to make sure that they're not going to end up making more cortisol at the expense of all their other hormones. And that's a whole separate podcast right there.
Obviously, hormone therapy, whether it's bioidentical or HRT, isn't the sole focus of what you do. What I love what you do, Dr. Anna, is your programs around hormone health and weight loss, and truly looking at, you're consultative. One thing I read on your website, which I would recommend everyone to go to, it's www.drAnnaGarrett.com, and Garrett has 2 R's and 2 T's, and I'll repeat that again at the end of the podcast. But one thing you mentioned there is the ideal client. Can you tell us a little bit about the ideal client or the ideal woman that's going to work well with your approach and why that is?
So my ideal clients are generally between the ages of 40 and 60, and you wouldn't believe the number of people that email me and go, I'm 39, can I not work with you? I'm like, of course you can work with me, but they, I would say, to a large extent, have a mistrust of Western medicine, or they have been dismissed by their doctor as, your symptoms really aren't anything, or you're too young to be going through perimenopause, or they want to avoid hormone therapy and prefer to take a more quote-unquote natural approach. I consider bioidentical hormones natural, so that sort of is a misnomer, but they consider it more natural, so that's fine, and I understand what they're talking about. So I would say those are the women that are most likely to get good results working with me. And then I would add in another little bit of that, they need to be ready to do the work, because I can come up with the most elegant management plan on the planet, but if they're not ready to do the work and they're looking for, a magic bullet, this is not it. So making change, it can be hard, and that's why I love my coaching background so much, is because I can support them through the changes that they need to make and really help them break down barriers that they're experiencing.
Can you give us an idea of what that first consultative visit might look like? Like if someone's kind of interested in thinking, I want to give her a call, what does that look like, and what kind of questions might ask her? Without giving too much of it away, because I realize it's your business as well.
Well, I actually have a couple of ways people can sort of, I say, enter my ocean. I do offer a low cost initial consultation that is accessible to just about anybody that needs some guidance. And before we have our call, I send them some questions about what's going on with their health and what they've tried and what's worked and what hasn't, and just kind of get an idea of the lay of the land so that I can begin to think about what recommendations I can give them that might help. And so we talk for 45 minutes and we get into the details of their situation, and I give them, 2 or 3 ideas to start with that they can implement on their own. And then they can keep in touch with me for a month afterwards by email, and I'm happy to, give advice or, tweak things if they need help. So that's the first way. And then the second way is to, if you want to have your hormones tested, then, I figure out which kit is best, and I have a way more extensive health history than what I offer in that less expensive initial consultation. So we talk through things like diet and supplements they're on and medications they're on, because as a pharmacist, I'm able to weave in my knowledge of pharmaceuticals into, my knowledge of supplements and make sure that there's no interactions, that we're not going to have any problems. And then I have a fairly extensive symptom history that I ask them to rate their symptoms on a scale of 1 to 10, and to give me an idea of what they typically eat in a day so that I can get an idea of whether they're actually eating enough, especially when it comes to weight loss, which may sound counterintuitive, but you would be amazed at the calorie restriction that people place on themselves when they start to gain weight, and that's exactly the wrong thing to do. And so we get into a lot of that, and I sometimes have them track what they eat for a week or so in my FitnessPal app so that I can actually see what they're doing. So it just depends on which way you want to go, but those are the 2 typical ways that people begin to work with me.
Women are often, reluctant to spend time and money on themselves because they think they'll just tough it out. Or I think sometimes often as we start to experience perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms, we're not really sick enough to go see a doctor, quote unquote sick enough. We find, a lot of women who come to us, or just, we interact with through Genev.com, don't really even know that there's a better way that they could feel. And so there's a lot of latent need or unawareness, I think, out there with women. What's your response to, women being aware enough to want to do something, like to work with someone like you to find a better way to live and a better way to feel?
Well, and I think you bring up an important point about awareness, because the beginnings of perimenopause can look like so many other things. So if you have fatigue and you're not sleeping well and you are having anxiety, if you go to your doctor and say that, the likelihood is that you're going to come out with a prescription for an antidepressant or some Xanax or something like that, when actually you don't have a Prozac deficiency, you have a hormone imbalance. And in a 7-minute doctor visit, it's really hard to get down to root causes of what's going on. And so it's much easier to write a prescription for something than it is to really sit and have a detailed conversation about what's going on. And that's not an indictment of the medical system at all. I mean, I've worked in the medical system. I've been paid on productivity, and I know how hard it is to see enough patients to have the income level that you want to have. So the incentives in the healthcare system are all completely misaligned, but that, again, is another podcast. So, I mean, I would say to women, especially if they're like in their mid to late 30s, to start reading about perimenopause so that you can, when things start to go a little bit sideways, you can have that more in the top of your mind, and think about offering that to your healthcare provider as something that may be going on. And, it's interesting that you were saying about women just not feeling, quote unquote, sick enough to go to a doctor. Perimenopause can last up to 10 years, and that's a lot of time to tough it out. So what I would say to women about that is toughen it out doesn't help anyone, because while you're busy suffering, your mental energy is draining away from what you love, and you're basically having the joy sucked out of your life. And women in midlife are likely to have put themselves on the back burner for a really long time. And so I look at midlife as an opportunity to really step up and reclaim your life. I mean, your kids are gone. You may have a little more financial freedom to really pursue what energizes you. And I get a lot of women telling me, well, I can't work with you because my insurance won't cover it. And I understand that finances are something to think about, but you know what? Why should insurance companies get to tell us how good we get to feel? I think about all the things that women spend money on, or how many bottles of useless supplements they have laying around the house. And when you work with somebody who's a professional, yes, it's an investment, but you don't end up spending money on things that aren't going to work. So, or getting bad advice from a Facebook group. That's the thing that amazes me the most. I have a private Facebook group, and I'm also a member of a lot of other ones that are related to menopause. And, people come in there and they post their test results and then want just random people to comment on them. I'm like, are you kidding me? So that kind of stuff is going on quite a bit, as well as all the time that you spend on Google, trying to figure out your own diagnosis. So I say, make the leap, spend the money on yourself, and do yourself a favor, and your family, actually.
What does it look like when you see a woman who's truly got her midlife mojo back?
One of my clients a couple of years ago she was an art teacher, and she was having such bad hot flashes and sweats that she had to change her clothes twice a day. And she wouldn't go buy anything new because she just knew that she was going to, ruin it by the amount of sweating she was doing. And so I worked with her and we got her back in balance, and she wasn't changing her clothes at all during the day, and she finally allowed herself the gift of going shopping and buying herself a whole new wardrobe because she knew that everything was going to be okay. I have another one right now that I'm working with. I'm getting ready to launch a new weight loss program in June, so I have some beta clients right now that I'm testing it on. And she had gotten the thought in her head that her husband didn't want her sexually anymore because she had gained weight. And she was just totally preoccupied with this. I think she gained maybe 20 pounds. And she just kept ruminating in this story. And we were talking, and I said, what was his sex drive like when you got married? Was it completely different? And there was silence on the end of the phone, and she was like, well, no, it was exactly the same. And I said, so his sex drive has nothing to do with your weight. And just that you could almost hear her, that rush of breath when she was able to look at that situation and drop that story. And her relationship with her husband has actually gotten much better, and she's lost weight. So, that's not so much about hormone balance. That's about doing the thought work to get yourself out of the stuck place.
So with both of these women, can you just so our listeners are really clear, they obviously each of them reached out to you initially for a consult. Then was that like a 2-week plan then that you worked with them, or is it 3 months, or how? Is it all over telephone, or do they come see you, or what are the mechanics like in terms of a woman saying, Dr. Anna, I want to come work with you. What's next?
So the woman whose story I told first actually worked with me for 6 months. And that is my preferred length of time to work with people, just because it allows us to develop a relationship. And some of the methods that I use take time to actually work. I used to have a 3-month program, but I have stopped offering that just because I didn't feel like that was a good amount of time to see enough change. So 6 months is my preferred way to go. The weight loss program is 8 weeks, so that's another option, but that doesn't include the hormone testing, but it can be added on. And then I have the hormone testing plus the single consultation. So if somebody is a do-it-yourselfer and they just want some guidance and don't need coaching along, then the testing with the consultation could be fine. And, if they come back later and say, I need more help, then we just pick up where we left off. So most of my work is done virtually by phone or Zoom. But I just yesterday actually got myself an office space 1 day a week starting in August in Asheville because I'd like to have some more local clients. So right now I see people in my house and I have a space that's perfect for it, but I mostly need to get out of the house. So I figured having an office space 1 day a week was probably the way to go with that.
So it sounds like, you obviously work virtually as well as in office. So you serve clients around the United States. So women from all over can contact you, it sounds like.
I actually have clients in Taiwan and Qatar. So I go worldwide.
Fantastic. Wow. Yeah, women experience these things outside any border. I'm sure borders don't mean a thing.
I love it. It's exactly the kind of business I had visualized when I set out to create it because I love to travel and I want to be able to work anywhere. So it's perfect.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know societally, at least in the U.S., and I don't know if this is the same in other countries that you work in, we still treat menopause as a really taboo subject. And I think that goes to the notion of women just not being aware that there's a better way to feel and to live. But there's, shame and age associated with it. How do you, how do you address that with your clients or with your patients around embracing this change and not, I guess, feeling so ashamed? It's reality and it's part of our bodies.
Well, I think the good news is that I think the tide is starting to shift a little bit around this. There are a number of women who are very active on social media anyway that are talking about menopause, so that's good. And it's not like anybody gets to opt out of this, so we all have to go through it. And, if anybody had told me that I would be doing this at this point in my life, I would have said they were crazy. But I'm like, well, who am I not to do this? Because I've got the knowledge and the expertise, and I don't want to see women suffering needlessly. And there's really nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, this is a beautiful time of life. You have all the wisdom of all the years that have led up to this, and it's just, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I would not be 30 years old again for anything. So we're wiser, we have more freedom, we have fewer responsibilities in general, and we should not be wasting our time feeling ashamed. We should be enjoying all of this time in our lives to the fullest, and you can't do that when you're shrouded in a cloak of shame. So I say nothing to be ashamed about because we're all doing it.
I think that's great. And that's a perfect way to kind of bring this to a close. At the close of every podcast, we always ask our interviewee to share their one piece of advice to our listeners. What piece of advice would you like to leave with the Genev listeners today?
I would say if you're suffering at all, find somebody to reach out to help you, because you're going to waste a lot of time and a lot of joy in your life by suffering from something that actually can be fixed. And it's not like it's broken. Fixed is probably not the right word, but there are problems that can be solved, and you can feel a lot better than you feel if things are not going well.
That's great. That's great. It is. It's the importance of the tribe. And talking it out, because I think the more I hear the dialogue starting, the more the women come out of the woodwork, and it's just really incredible what women are experiencing and also the triumphs that they've had. And the more we can share that around, I think that's going to be a good uplifting thing for all women. So thank you, Dr. Anna. This has been wonderful. Gosh, I've learned a lot just listening to you. I want to just remind everyone of your website, www.drAnnaGarrett.com. Garrett is GARRETT.com. And I really encourage folks to reach out to you. And again, thank you for spending some time with us today and talking a lot more about hormonal health and I think the actions that women can take to manage it.
Well, it's been great fun, so I really appreciate you having me here.
Thanks for listening to the G-Spot. We welcome your feedback at Geneve.com. That's GENNEVE.com. You can follow us on Facebook, where you will see more on show notes, and subscribe to us on iTunes, and you'll never miss an episode. The G-Spot is produced by Shannon Perry. Theme music by Smitty. And from all of us at Geneve, think happy, healthy vaginas.